The world is evolving at a faster pace than ever before, and as we begin the path to recovery after worldwide disruption, this podcast explores how design industries can adapt to changing expectations and create a better future for both your businesses and your consumers. I'm Carla Buzasi, CEO of WGSN and your host this week. You're listening to Create Tomorrow, the WGSN podcast. This week, it's time once more to turn the spotlight on a brand, business or individual leading the way in some of the fastest growing trend areas impacting design industries today. In this episode, I speak to CEO of Copenhagen Fashion Week, Cecilie Thorsmark, who as leader of this sustainability-focused fashion week is on a mission to change the way the entire fashion industry thinks about its impact on the environment and the wider world around them. Cecilie and I have been speaking a lot recently as she consults with the wider industry around her mission to drive genuine change in both the fashion week she runs, but also with the hope that systems that are put in place in Copenhagen can be translated for other fashion weeks elsewhere in the world. So I was delighted to invite her to contribute to Create Tomorrow. In this episode, you'll hear us discuss why sustainability is more important than ever before and the network she's currently building in the Nordics, plus our call for action to other fashion leaders. Thank you so much for joining me. I feel we've had many conversations in recent weeks and months as our two organisations get closer and closer together. But before we get into all the great work that Copenhagen Fashion Week is doing, I'm really interested in your personal opinions in this area and why you've been so drawn to it. And also why you feel so strongly about it. There are many people in the fashion industry at the moment who are talking a lot, there is action taking place, but you as an individual and the organisation that you lead are certainly at the forefront. So where did this passion for this topic come from?
Well, and first of all, thank you for having me, Carla. It's a pleasure to connect once again. No, I think my passion comes from my prior tenure at the Global Fashion Agenda, where I spent quite a few years. I was heading up communications in the team and working with sustainability and promoting sustainability in fashion every day for almost 10 years. That definitely sparked both passion and interest, also a bit of knowledge, I hope, but most of all, this really desire to be in the industry for a purpose. I love the fashion industry. I also love fashion and enjoy also in my new role going around to shows and experiencing collections and the universes that are built around the collections. But it has to resonate with what's going on around us. And I felt that fashion weeks for sure did not really resonate or reflect what was going on in society in general. And that's what actually motivated me to apply for this position as CEO of Copenhagen Fashion Week. Because I must be honest that it was when I realized that the position was vacant. It wasn't, set in stone or a natural move for me to go from, working so hard with sustainability and then switching paths completely. So I knew that I wanted to bring on my experience and definitely also my feelings for sustainability and for a better future for the fashion industry and ultimately for the planet as well. So that's what drove me and what motivated me to apply to see if I could, challenge the Fashion Week format and innovate the Fashion Week business model.
Critics of the industry, of which there are many, would say that there is no such thing as a sustainable fashion week. We've seen protests around the world during fashion weeks. We've seen vehement opposition to it. How are you going to kind of navigate that very tricky path to create something which you believe really will drive change and have fashion weeks as a kind of tool for this industry?
First of all, I would love to emphasize. I think it's justified. There is no such thing as a sustainable fashion week or a sustainable fashion industry, but we all have a huge responsibility in doing better and in being held accountable for our actions. So I think we do have fashion weeks, but for me, what's essential is that there's leadership in fashion weeks that are motivated to drive industry change, not only to, let's say, execute a more responsible event, because anyone can, come up with, alternative measures in terms of, event planning and execution in general. But I think it's essential that we as, big, important, and also influential events take responsibility to say, hey, we have a voice, and how can we use that voice to demand action from the industry? And just to add a little note to that, I think we would have been much further developed as an industry if politics had taken responsibility, if there had been, regulation. But apparently, and I think you can look at any government or any country in the world, there's definitely, politics have been lagging, or regulation have been lagging behind. But I don't think it's too late. I just think that it's essential that then, that we're other players in the fashion industry that try to regulate or demand change.
It is an interesting topic, though, isn't it, as to whose responsibility is this? Is it the consumer's responsibility to demand more sustainable fashion choices? Is it the brand's responsibility to create more sustainable ranges? Is it the retailers to only stock sustainable brands? Or is it government? Is it politics? Is it policymakers? Now, you've taken a stand within that, but it does sound like you're kind of frustrated that there aren't more aspects or more organisations at, I guess, different levels, perhaps, that are also taking a stronger stance.
I mean, I'm happy to be seeing more and more retailers, for example, taking the same stance and, demanding a certain minimum level of sustainability from brands in order to take them in. So I think I'm hoping for, this to be a development in general, or a tendency in general, that more and more, players from within the fashion system are ready to take the responsibility and do something. And I also, and the brands, I think, especially, I can only maybe speak on behalf of the Danish fashion industry, since that's what we're primarily representing here at Copenhagen Fashion Week. But the brands are really, really driven to change how they're doing business. And, it's been on their agenda for so many years. I would say, since the Copenhagen Fashion Summit, not week, but the summit, started in 2008 in Copenhagen. It's really been maybe not top of mind to begin with, but as the years passed, it was a topic that really manifested itself in in the awareness of brands. So there's been a lot of will to change within the industry, but the industry is so fragmented, and there's so many small and medium-sized enterprises that if there's no, common direction, or no one, big platform saying, "Hey, let's do this together," then we're not going to be able to move the needle. I think we need to have bigger collaborative efforts around sustainability in general, and not leave it solely up to the brands, because the will is there from the brands, but they cannot do it by themselves.
So you work with some established brands, but also lots of new starters, entrepreneurs, new individuals and designers coming to the market. Sustainability is such a broad umbrella. There's so many issues underneath that. What's the advice, or what's the direction you're giving to some of these newer brands as to where they should be focusing their efforts at the moment?
So I think, for example, if you look at the Copenhagen Fashion Week brands, they represent the entire spectrum of the fashion industry in terms of, size and segment. And for that reason, they also have different, strategies in place, and they're built around different, business models. So I think my first answer to your question would be there's no such thing as, one size fits all. But what we're doing with our our approach on sustainability, where we've outlined a long list of action points, which we call our minimum sustainability requirements. And these action points cover the entire value chain. So what we advise brands to do, and a lot of brands are doing it currently, is that right now they are identifying the areas in which they are working, but also the areas in which they're lagging behind. And it's around 80 questions that we're asking. And that allows us and consultants to make gap analyses for the brands, which will allow them to identify the areas in which they can improve. So it will differ from brand to brand. But I think ultimately what's important is that they are able to, have insights into their own sustainability standing currently, but also be able to see then, what areas are there in which I can improve, and if I do, will that lead to progress within the firm? So that's our stand, and I already forgot your question, but I think I answered it somewhat.
No, I think you answered the question perfectly there. But sustainability, I think when you say the word sustainability, you think about environmental factors. But what has been really interesting in the past, I'd say, 12, little longer than that, 18 months, with things like the Black Lives Matter movement, is more of a focus on diversity and inclusion within the fashion industry, which again does not have a particularly good reputation when it comes to this area. What kind of positive influence have you seen from the uprisings and the kind of outpouring and demand that has come from consumers, from activists on this topic, but that kind of broader diversity and inclusion topic as well? Are you seeing change happening now? Are you positive that there will be more change? And again, where does Copenhagen Fashion Week fit within this? Is it going to become part of, your demand for sustainability, that diversity and inclusion is a kind of key pillar there?
So I think for sure Black Lives Matter definitely has had a positive influence also on brands that we work with. In the Danish fashion industry, we've had a Danish fashion ethical charter since 2008. And it started out with another focus. It was a lot about the health and the body ideals of models. I'm sure you remember as well in your parts of the world that was something that we spoke a lot about back around 2010. Skinny models and so forth, and how to make sure that they were treated well and so forth. But the Danish Fashion Ethical Charter has evolved over the years, and I think around 2016, if I'm not mistaken, we introduced some principles around diversity, in fact. And the brands since then have been working actively to, for example, have diverse model casts during Fashion Week. But I think we can all nod our heads to that a diverse model cast doesn't really make a big difference. Of course, I mean, what it does is that it conveys a more diverse beauty ideal, which I think is super important. But it doesn't really necessarily mean that, action being taken from within the companies or change being made in the companies. So I think Black Lives Matter definitely helped accelerate that. So what we're seeing during Fashion Week at least is that diversity, and that's both in terms of everything from ethnicity, skin color, but also gender, ages, and in general body positivity. We're seeing that not only on the catwalk but also in the audience and on the streets of Copenhagen. And I think even though it sounds very basic, I really think that signals that there's more inclusion, because it's not like the demographics of Denmark have changed remarkably over the last 5 years, but our audience has, and I'm hoping that it's a sign that there's a more inclusive atmosphere during Fashion Week. But there's still work to be done. While let's take an example, some hairstylists and makeup artists are by now experienced working with different both, skin colors and hair textures, we still face some challenges, and also in the workplaces. So it's something that, besides, Fashion Week, it's also something that we're focused on in our 2023 requirements, that we want to promote diversity within companies. It's funny that you're asking, actually, because when we launched our sustainability requirements in 2020, so a year and a half ago, we had 17 minimum standards. And after Black Lives Matter, we included another one. So now we have 18 minimum standards. And I don't remember right now the exact phrasing of it, but it was in order to include a minimum standard promoting diversity and working strategically with diversity in the company, where the focus that we'd had before was human rights, but in the supply chain, which obviously is still super important and super urgent and crucial. But we were actually, to begin with, forgetting our own companies. So we included that as an 18th minimum standard.
Now, with these standards or these requirements, how much of this is carrot and how much is stick? I mean, are you forcing this upon companies, and are you going to bar them from Copenhagen Fashion Week if they don't hit those requirements? Or is this more of a, we'd like you to get here and we are going to support you to meet those if you're going to show on the runway?
No, I mean, it is requirements. So any brand that does not live up to the requirements cannot take part in Copenhagen Fashion Week. But they're, of course, allowed to, they're not banned forever from Fashion Week, but they can spend time, working on their, improving their environmental, social, and climate footprint, and then they are, totally welcome to try again, and hopefully they'll be able to comply then with our standards. But that being said, I'm making it sound like a super potentially excluding tool that we've set in place. I would say the primary purpose is to actually motivate brands to, reach that higher level of sustainability. So we launched our sustainability requirements in 2020, as I mentioned. We gave them 3 years. We said by 2023, that's when the requirements are going to come into effect. And that's when you have to be, at this level, complying with 18 minimum standards, but also scoring a minimum amount of points in this sustainability requirements survey that we have developed together with an engineering company.
You mentioned early on the need for collaboration. Now, there are lots of fashion weeks around the world, some better known than others. What's the appetite amongst some of the other fashion weeks to align with Copenhagen Fashion Week in terms of these requirements and sort of creating thresholds that allow brands to take part, but only if they are going to, I'll say, put their money where their mouth is and actually, start making the necessary changes to ensure that the fashion industry, isn't such a big polluter and is more diverse and is doing the right thing for the planet on multiple different fronts.
No, we've made our own sustainability action plan where we actually laid it out as a target for us to connect with other organizations and fashion weeks, because we believe that, if we were the only ones implementing these sustainability requirements at Copenhagen Fashion Week, then hopefully it would give Copenhagen Fashion Week some sort of competitive advantage, and the brands at Copenhagen Fashion Week a competitive advantage. But that's not the point. What we wanted was to inspire other fashion weeks and organizations to do the same and to collaborate with us on our requirements system. So it's something that we're offering to other companies. But one thing is having it as a target, as a strategic target that we want to collaborate with others. But the beautiful thing is that we've actually been approached by a lot of both fashion weeks and organizations who've wanted to, get in touch regarding this. And we have also already signed our first new non-Danish partners. It's the Norwegian fashion industry, where both the industry organization called Norwegian Fashion Hub and their Fashion Week in Oslo have signed up to implement our sustainability requirements, which means that they're also going to make all of this mandatory for all the brands that they work with, both in their industry organization, but also at their Fashion Week. So that's fantastic. And I think we are in a dialogue currently with an additional 5, 6, 7 organizations and fashion weeks. But for example, here in Denmark as well, I think, and that's not to forget, I think one milestone was when the biggest trade fair in Denmark also signed up to our requirements system. It's the trade fair called SIF, that represent around 1,500 exhibitors. They said that they would implement the requirements too, meaning that from 2023, they will demand of their exhibitors to live up to this long list of minimum standards. So that's, now we're talking volume, right? Because when we launched it, it was something that would affect roughly 30 to 40 show brands. And now 1,500 exhibitors, that's quite a number. So it's gaining volume, and I think volume is quite crucial for, generating impact as well.
I totally agree, but let's hope that this is a call to arms for all those other fashion weeks around the globe to also align here, because it seems like, why wouldn't you? Why would we not utilize this tool to move the entire industry forward, no matter where in the world brands might be showing? It's very hard to ignore the fact that we have been going through seismic change in the past 18 months, and that's had a direct impact on what we wear, how we shop, and for brands, how they showcase their wares. Multiple fashion weeks completely cancelled, brands having to move to digital formats. What's been your experience during that? And do you think there's positive lessons learned that you at Copenhagen Fashion Week will take forward, but that you expect other fashion weeks to as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think what COVID did was that it first of all, it forced us to innovate the format of Fashion Week. So while our Fashion Week used to be a almost 100% physical event with, of course, a bit of Instagram coverage and so forth. Now it's a hybrid fashion week, allowing us to be, fully present, in the physical, in-person world, but also fully present digitally through live streaming of all shows and a YouTube partnership and many more digital initiatives that we've made. So that has, that's of course been super beneficial, because it has allowed us to grow our audience remarkably. Actually, I think this season we got around 700,000 views, which includes, both the views on our website and the YouTube figures. And compared to last summer, we had not even, but almost 50,000 views. So it's, it's more than tenfold after just 1 year. So there's definitely benefits that, our week, but also more importantly, our brands are exposed to a much bigger and wider international audience. So even though we're going back to being able to do physical fashion weeks, we're of course still working strategically to grow our digital presence and our digital audience. So a very steep learning curve, I think we all say. I think COVID-19 was, and still is a little bit, but really was a crazy ride. And I must also say that, this fashion week, being able to connect with the industry again and get these in real life experiences of shows and collections again is something that I think we've all really missed.
As one of the viewers of your shows digitally this season, I will say, look, there is no substitute for actually being able to see those things in the flesh. But there is an awesome advantage with attending a fashion week and not having to worry about an entire wardrobe. And being able to do it sitting in your slippers in front of your computer. So I can definitely see the advantages on both sides. We're out of time, sadly. I feel there's so much more that we could cover, but I want to thank you not only for chatting to me today, but also the amazing work that's happening. And as I said, I do hope this acts as another reminder and a wake-up call to all those fashion weeks out there that there is more that they can do to help drive the industry forward. And I'm encouraged by what I've seen from many of the designers who are showing at Copenhagen Fashion Week and indeed some other fashion weeks as well, and the passion and commitment that many brands are now putting into this agenda, because without it, our world will be a worse off place, but I think the fashion industry will be too. So thank you again. It was lovely chatting to you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Carla. A pleasure to connect and speak about this important topic. And thank you for also giving time on your big platform to convey this and to promote this and let us tell our story. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much to Cecilie. I'd also like to thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed what you've heard, then please subscribe to the show, which is available on all major podcast platforms. And if you really like what you heard, then please leave us a rating and review on iTunes. It helps us get the word out there. If you're interested in what you've been talking about today, then please head over to WGSN.com to find out how you can get access to all our insight and analysis. We're constantly publishing new articles around how we can design a brighter, better future for our industry. So thank you again to my guest, and I'd also like to thank our podcast producers, Roland Bodenham and Bethan Ryder, and thank you for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time. So until then, stay well and healthy, and we'll see you soon.